Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Boy Manning here. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the Garden Report. We got an off day from practice, and Jay King's here.
And you got a phone call.
Practice. Yes, right on time. Welcome in, Jay, here to the Garden Report. And a lot happened, I feel like. Media day was pretty long. We had 2 practices, got to talk to quite a few Celtics here. And there's obviously a lot of players gone and a lot of new faces to try to figure out here, which is different. It's been a couple years where we've pretty much known everybody from the start and what this team's going to do. Now we're talking about new systems and styles and trying to figure out what this thing's going to look like here. And I find that pretty exciting.
Yeah, like last year especially was kind of weird to write about because they changed nothing. They brought back all the same guys. I mean, Peyton Pritchard emerged as a 6th man of the year. Luke Cornett emerged as one of the best backup big men in the NBA. But really, like, they were playing the same lineups. They were playing the same guys. There was not much that changed. Now that a lot's going to change. Sounds like their playing style is going to change. Their rotation is certainly going to change and quite a bit. And young guys are going to have to pop up and be useful. And I'm looking forward to it. I think after, the last couple of years, you knew what to expect. Now there's a lot of unknown, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest news we've gotten out of camp is universal agreement that they're going to play faster.
And it sounds like much faster.
Yeah, and Pritchard said they need to. He was talking about that late in last season. I know Horford was big on that too when he was here, but they just couldn't get it done. They seemed to get slower as the year went on. And then in one of those first Brad pressers over the offseason, he was like, yeah, the thing's grinded to a halt in the Knicks series there. And I think Joe's probably pushed back against it a little bit, at least what we're, defining his pace here, because they were 29th, right? I think, you and some others wrote about this. They were down to 30th over the last couple of months, and it looked like it. Walking the ball up, taking a long time to get into their possessions. And, I don't disagree with Joe that there's many different ways you can look at pace, but regardless of how you do, it definitely slowed late last season. So do they have to be the Bulls and just go nuts up and down the floor, or, some of those old Suns teams? I don't know, but I think for Pritchard's sake, Brown, who loves to play fast, and White's pretty good in transition too, I think it makes a lot of sense to push the pace with this team. And then you're not in the half court as much. You're not trying to, get out of double teams and whatever else teams are going to throw at them while Tatum's out. I think it's pretty natural for them to want to do that. Are they actually going to be able to accomplish it? I think is another question.
Yeah, I think it just makes perfect sense with the strengths of their new look roster. You look around, their best players are perimeter players. They have a question mark at center. They have a question mark at power forward. Is Sam Hauser going to start there? Because I think he's the best option there. I think he's the best player you can use there. And if you start him there or start Jalen at power forward with Hauser at 3, however you want to look at it, you're going to be really small. And one way to counteract being really small is to play fast, not just fast on offense, but fast on defense. And that means picking up, pressuring more, creating more turnovers. They haven't forced turnovers at all during the Joe Mazzulla era. I think that was very much partly due to the personnel on the team. But I think with Kristaps Porzingis gone, with Al Horford gone, you've lost 2 guys that sort of forced you into a little more conservative approach defensively. Jason Tatum, I would say, like, he's as solid as it gets defensively. He's not going to be like the most disruptive guy. And now, if Peyton Pritchard starts next to Derek White, you're going to be really small. You gotta be getting after guys. You got to be getting up in transition. You don't have those automatic advantages, those 2-for-1s that Jason Tatum used to create for everybody else. Jaylen Brown has been one of the best transition scorers in the league over the past several years, even though the Celtics have played much slower. And he's been urging them to play faster for years now. It seems like a few times a year he pulls that out during a press conference and says, I've been asking guys to play faster. I've wanted to play faster. He said at one point we get in trouble when we walk the ball up the court, and it's true. And they don't want to do that anymore. And I think that's just one way to utilize the new roster. And also, maybe there is, but I don't see much separation between the 5th or 6th guy on this roster and the 11th or 12th. And if there's not much separation, then maybe you just play a lot of guys and have them play hard as hell while they're out there, and hope that playing hard and getting up and down the court can overcome some of the flaws of the roster.
Yeah, and maybe cycle in 4 or 5 guys at a time, like hockey.
The hockey subs that Jordan Walsh was talking about, but Joe Mazzulla sharply denied that one.
So speaking of starters, we'll get to the defense in a few here. I grab that social media post they did of the scrimmages out there and try to break down who's on either side, who's playing with who. And they're flashing all around. It's like 2 minutes, so it's tough to tell. But by the best view I could get, it looked like most of the starting unit that was out there was typically White, Pritchard, Hauser, Brown, and Keita. And that's the group that's been here. They played a decent amount of minutes together last season. And before Chris Boucher signed, I almost felt like this was the obvious starting 5. Like I didn't have much doubt that this was going to be it. You can have some questions with this group, particularly in the front court, but it's just the experienced guys who have mostly played together and guys who have earned their spots. When you think of White, Pritchard, I feel like, and Brown. And
Chris Boucher he's almost 33 years old. He plays power forward, but he started 23 games in his entire career. This has been a career backup. And we've seen
17 minutes a game, more or less.
We've seen the last few years when somebody's been out, whether it's Tatum, Brown, Derek White, Drew Holiday, a lot of the time they've just gone to Hauser and thrown him into the starting lineup. And I think it just makes sense to rely on the guys you trust the most, rely on the guys who are the best players. I think if you look at it in a vacuum, Sam Hauser is a better basketball player than Chris Boucher. I don't think there's anyone who would argue that. So play your best players, create a style that can make those guys work together and figure it out. I think it's a good year with Jason Tatum out and with all these new faces to kind of experiment, see what you have with different things. And I think Joe Mazzulla is going to be pretty creative here this coming season.
Yeah, and then when you get into the second units here, Simons was out there. Minot, you saw a little bit of Walsh, a little bit of Boucher playing alongside Garza, who was pretty steady in the Grays that were playing out there. I'm trying to think who else was in the mix out there with the second unit guys. But that was the most consistent group you saw there. You saw a little bit of Walsh. Walsh even mixed in with the green side. I couldn't tell who he was with out there necessarily, but he was wearing green sometimes. And then you got into I'm forgetting someone here.
I love the Zapruder film
breakdown
Shireman of the minute and a half of practice footage that they put out there.
Hey, you know me, Joe hates talking starters. I love trying to figure out, especially with this roster, who's going to be out there. And that might change here and there. I know Joe always talks about that. With recent teams, you haven't had many shifts in who's starting unless guys were out. This group, I feel like, could actually maybe go big sometimes, go a little smaller in other cases, or see things aren't working and make some adjustments there. I think we actually will see a decent amount of starting lineups throughout the year.
Yeah, it's not as easy as just throwing out Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis, and that's just your starting lineup. It's not going to be that easy. You're going to be choosing from imperfect choices, and I think Anfernee Simons said that we could even see the starting lineup change, and that he said that's something that's been said to him. So yeah, I think there's just uncertainty there that we haven't seen in a couple of years. And I know there was a little bit of uncertainty after the Drew Holiday trade about whether he was going to start, Al Horford was going to start. That was decided very early and never really changed. Obviously, Porzingis came off the bench some during the recent playoff run, but for the most part, when he was healthy, he started. Al Horford came off the bench, and that was that. But now there's real choices for Joe Mazzulla to make.
Yeah, and I think Keita seems like a pretty strong front runner at center. The other three are, I'd say, decently sure things. The Hauser Boucher trade-off will definitely be interesting, but I'm with you. I think Hauser gets the benefit of the doubt there for being there, and then Boucher probably has to play some reserve small minutes if Garza doesn't prove himself immediately. But I think they like Garza, so that's going to be interesting there in the front court. There'll definitely be some mixing and matching. I think the fans are most interested in Simons, Pritchard, and surprisingly, at least on Twitter, I feel like there's a lot of buzz for Simons grabbing that spot.
Don't put them together in the same sentence,
Yeah.
Bobby.
I'm already in hot water on a couple of fronts at camp. Yeah, so Simons, Pritchard's a debate among the fan base. I don't know how much of a debate it's going to be for Joe in particular, who just loves Pritchard. And I think Pritchard, whether he says it or not, always seems to want to push himself to another level. So I think he has some interest in starting or trying to, I'd imagine. And then Simons just hasn't been here, and they've been trying to acclimate him to this group and, get him up to speed with the defense. So I think it all points toward Pritchard at least starting there. And we heard from him at practice today. I want to go to some of that sound, but first I want to let everybody know about Prize Picks, which is a big baseball game coming up in just a little bit here. Use the code CLNS and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup over there. And whether you want to add Alex Bregman, go more on his hits, go more on Trevor Story's home runs, maybe more on Conley early strikeouts. I like that one tonight. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you could cash in. They put their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Football coming up tonight as well. Football is always fun. Whether it's Saquon Barkley, Josh Allen this Sunday. I think it'll be Drake May for the Patriots fans that you'll want to go more on passing yards, rushing yards, touchdowns, whatever it might be. They offer injury reboots, so if one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks won't count it as a loss. If your full season fantasy team's falling apart, this is a good way to try a new one every single week. And they got the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. So once again, it's one of the best ways to win cash this football season. If you go over, download the app, use the code CLNS, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Let's hear from Anfernee Simons, who talked a lot about his defense over the last couple of days.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and it's just a matter of if I want to do it or not. You know what I mean? It's really that simple. Like I said, coming into a culture like this, you have to be able to adapt, or you're not gonna be in the position that you want to be, and whether it's playing or not playing. So to me, it's really that simple, and that's the honest conversations we had about it. And he always says that you're not as bad as people think you are, and so that's good to hear. But also, I got to do the work to get better in that end and focus in on exactly what we need to do on the defensive end. And so, like I said, I'm pretty excited about being pushed into a new level of which I can reach. Yeah, he brought it up. Obviously in his Joe way. He gonna throw jabs at you. You know what I mean? Just talking smack to you. But I enjoy it. You know what I mean? That's what he's challenging me with. So I'm taking on a challenge, and no matter if he talks smack to me all day about it, I'm going to take it in and just try to be better the next day. So that's all we've been doing, just a simple conversation like that. Yeah, for sure. That's one of the first things when I got here. That's the first things we worked on, is just being a playmaker in that way. Whether it's stabbing at the balls, trying to steal the ball, look at passing lanes, being in the right spot each every time. And so that's one of the things we drilled for the first 4 weeks I was here, before training camp. So those things, are something I never really worked on or, been taught. And so I was happy that, that was the focus, and, we could see, the impact on those 4 weeks of, just working on that stuff.
That was a lot of interesting stuff there. What stuck out to you most hearing from Simons for the first time?
Well, it's always funny hearing somebody who hasn't been a good defender say that it's all about wanting to. It's like, why haven't you wanted to yet? And
I just wasn't trying. That one stood out first. Yeah.
Yeah. One that wasn't included that stood out to me was that he thinks this situation with Joe Mazzulla pushing him will help him, will be good for his career. He said a lot of things over the last few days about wanting to contribute to winning. When asked about whether he wanted to start, he said he doesn't care. He just wants to contribute to winning. And I think he knows, like, Portland once valued him at a really high level and thought that he was the future of that backcourt after Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Now he's 26. He just got traded. They basically chose Scoot Henderson over him. They did choose Drew Holiday, who's a 35-year-old who already showed signs of decline and has $104 million left on his contract, over him. And the Celtics, after getting him, like, they looked into the trade market to see if they could shed salary with using his contract. And so he has to know that what he's done to date isn't good enough for teams around the league to see him as a bona fide starting point guard or a bona fide contributor on a great team. And this is a prove it year for him. He has to show that he can defend at a higher level than he has in the past. He has to show that he can play alongside great players. And I like the attitude that he's shown toward it so far. And I think Joe's a good coach to help drag that out of somebody. But at the end of the day, he has been statistically, based on some stats that I trust and value, like EPM, estimated plus minus, one of the very worst defenders in the league since stepping onto an NBA court. And that has to change. He doesn't have to be the greatest defender ever. Doesn't have to be Drew Holiday, but you can't be a huge minus every time you step on the court either. Quite frankly, he's not that good. He's a great offensive player, but he's not good enough where he can get away with that. So it's a big year for him.
Yeah, for sure. And I also find interesting Joe saying you're not as bad as people think you are, and him going to him and bringing this up himself, this conversation, because Joe's earned a lot of trust from different guys who have been here, and he was even assistant coaches for him before Ime went out, and even that last Brad year. So he's known guys pretty well who he's been able to challenge for the most part, or guys lower on the roster who aren't necessarily stars. This is him going right at a guy who had been a star in the past and challenging him and pushing him and jabbing at him here. And this is certainly a guy who maybe isn't playing for his NBA life, but is definitely trying to get his next contract here and figure out what's next for him. So, that was an interesting risk I think he took, taking that approach with him. And the fact that Simons seemed to receive it pretty well, we'll see what actually happens when we get into games and, distributing minutes and roles and all that. It's a win for Joe, I feel like. And again, who knew if Simons was even going to be here? I was in favor of keeping him around. Like, I don't think a guy like that, a salary dump, made much sense. And there definitely wasn't much value for him out there, clearly. So, when people would ask who needs this guy around the league, there's a lot of point guards, there's a lot of scorers around the league. There's not a lot of teams that need him. I was like, the Celtics kind of do. Like, Tatum's out. They don't have a ton in their backcourt. They need this guy, and I don't know if he's a long-term piece here or not, but they should take every opportunity they can to try to figure that out. Now, in terms of the defense he's going to be playing here, he talked about it there. They're swiping, they're doing different drills like that. Josh Minot talked about some of the stuff they're doing that he's never done before. It is kind of funny to hear that they've never done this stuff, but the Celtics haven't, as you said, prioritized forcing turnovers. And even Joe hasn't denied that that's going to be something they're trying to do this year. He's talked about that in the past, and they haven't actually done it. They've been bottom 5 the last 3 years here in forcing turnovers. Are they actually going to be able to get it done now with the personnel that they have in this system that they're talking about?
Well, you better, right? Because you don't have some of the best rim protection in the league anymore. You don't have Kristaps Porzingis, Al Horford, and Luke Kornet to save you. You don't have Jason Tatum, one of the best defensive rebounders at his position, to help you out. Like, quite frankly, this roster has some serious defensive limitations, and I think one way to overcome those is to force more turnovers, be more aggressive, send more traps. And like I said, they might play really small, and I think it's really important for them that Simons is at least a non-zero defensively. I'm As long as he if he can play next to Derek White and Peyton Pritchard, and you can get away with playing those three guys, you are going to be super difficult to guard on offense. There are very few teams equipped to guard those three, Jaylen Brown, but you have to have a way to defend. And I think forcing turnovers, I think running around, being everywhere, like you have to do that. This roster has no choice. You don't have the guys to cover up for you. You don't have the size that you used to have. You are smaller, you're faster, you're more athletic, and I just think they're going to need to play a lot differently defensively than they have in the past 3 years.
Yeah, and if they want to run, they got to rack up some stops somehow. And that's the thing. They've been a great defense going back to the Brad years. I think I was looking back at all the defensive ratings. It was only like 2 years since the beginning of Brad's tenure that they haven't been in like the top 6 to 13 or so in defensive rating. So it'll be interesting to see them try to figure it out on that end, because they don't have amazing talent on that end, and everybody's playing up a little bit in terms of their responsibilities. Everyone's probably going to have to guard up in size. I don't know how much you're going to want to switch this year. How much is Kada playing straight up at center? Like, I'm a fan of him playing off some weaker shooters and roaming a little bit, but I don't even think he'll be able to do that here if they're not going double big. He'll just have to be guarding centers. So there's a million questions defensively for this team that we're just going to have to watch play out. And frantic effort and just guys jumping and passing lanes and making those kind of plays is going to be a lot of this, especially Jaylen, who preaches a lot of that stuff, has talked a lot about it. He wants to be recognized on the all defense level, and I don't think he's quite been in that conversation yet. He's definitely come a long way on that end and has taken on some big challenges, and this year might even have to be the communicator and all that. This could definitely be a year where he gets some recognition on that end, but it's going to be a big challenge for everybody, including him.
Yeah, and the one wild card I would throw into that mix is Xavier Tillman. Because
are you buying the hype?
I don't know if I'm buying the hype, but if he is healthy and he can move, I certainly don't buy the 3-point hype. He has never been a good 3-point shooter. Hasn't come close to 30% for his career. Like, I am not buying the Xavier Tillman 3-point hype. However, we know that when he's healthy, when he's right physically, he is a great defender. Like, not just good, he's great. They
go back to that EPM stat you used, and he was up there with anybody defensively.
And they used him in the finals where he was switching onto Luka and then switching onto Kyrie. There aren't many big men in the league who can do that. He racks up steals. He racks up blocks. He's very solid positionally. He's just a super high IQ defender. And you need a lot of that after losing Jrue Holiday, Al Horford, Luke Cornett, Kristaps Porzingis. They lost so much of their defensive fabric that if he can be just a playable offensive player, he's not going to be a great offensive player. He doesn't finish well enough. He's not a super athlete. He's not going to be a lob threat. Like I said, the shooting has never been there, even though he says he feels much more comfortable now. But his defense could be really important if he can stay on the court. And so I think that's a real wild card right now. Other than that, like you said, Jaylen's going to have a lot on his shoulders. I think all the guards are going to have some serious responsibility, especially if they are pressuring and playing as fast as they're saying they're going to on defense. Then, it's Derek White is going to have a lot of responsibility. Peyton Pritchard is going to have to be picking up full court and getting into guys. And he's talked about wanting to be more disruptive, be more of a defensive playmaker versus just staying in front of guys and forcing tough shots. I just think, especially if you do play a lot of small lineups, those guys are going to have to make guys uncomfortable on the other side. And there's going to be a lot on Jaylen, a lot on Derek, because they used to have all defensive caliber players basically everywhere. And I would throw Tatum into that mix. I would throw Al Horford.
The Tatum loss is as big as anything, rebounding all the positions he can guard.
And he guarded fives. He guarded fives. So if you start Sam Hauser, like we've been talking about, who guards fives? Does Jaylen guard fives?
He might have to.
Do they just have Kada guard fives and then play more, traditionally matchup wise? because they've never wanted to do that. And I'm really curious to see how Joe approaches all that stuff, and whether Jalen or somebody else can take on that challenge and do some of the stuff that Jason Tatum did on a nightly basis.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued by Jalen talking about being more of a defensive guy this year, and when it came to proving himself and having that big year without Tatum, he's not hyping that up much. So maybe he is going to offload some of the offensive responsibility of the Pritchards, Whites of the world, some of these other guys, and focus more on big defensive assignments. Obviously, it's tough to do both, especially with the shoes he's going to be in there. So there's a lot to parse out here. We're less than a week from the first preseason game in Memphis, which would be interesting. That's not a super big team right now with all the injuries they have. So that'll be a good opportunity for them to maybe go small and try that look, and then maybe a little something different against the Raptors, Cavs, some of these other teams. They do have a pretty good preseason mix in terms of the types of teams they're going against here. A huge team in Cleveland, a smaller team, in Toronto and Memphis to some degree. So we're less than a week away from some games here. There's one other interesting thing I want to get to from the first couple of days of camp here that we mentioned. I want to give a quick shout out to Game Time, and that Red Sox game is underway down in New York. So if you're in New York, if you're in the Bronx and you're, a couple steps from Yankee Stadium, go over to Game Time, see what deals they got last minute here. I was looking earlier in the day, it was like 150. The prices went up a little bit going into the day, once they forced this game through here. But last minute, sometimes the best time to go and get a deal over on Game Time, and you get the Patriots playing this weekend. That's out in Buffalo if you want to drive out there. A lot of stuff going on. These preseason games we mentioned as well coming up. So all fees are included on Game Time, so you know your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can save even more when you choose a section like Game Time. Choose your seats, and you can snag new ticket deals before anyone finds out by following your favorite teams in the Game Time app to receive alerts. Concerts going on right now as well. You can get panoramic view of your seat, see exactly where you're going to be sitting in the app. That's my favorite feature over there. And they got the lowest price guarantee. Your Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. I've always loved using this app, even before we partner with them here. And it's a big time right now with a lot of events going on and for our coverage as well. So it helps us out a lot if you go over there and use the code CLNS. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, help us out. Get you $20 off your first purchase for you. Use that code CLNS. So create an account, redeem that code CLNS, swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Sox are underway. I'm excited to go over there and check out that game. The last couple of days have been awesome here, but I want to throw this at you, Jay. I'm so curious what you thought of this. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's just Jordan Walsh being Jordan Walsh. But there was a weird miscommunication or something that went on over the first couple of days of practice here, because Joe said Walsh was joking. It didn't sound like Walsh was joking here.
I think that going into this year, taking advantage of my athleticism will be my winning point, my strong point. I feel like I've come a long way with my three-point shot. I feel like if I'm open and I catch the ball, it's going in. And I feel like my team feels that way, and I feel like the coaches and staff feel that way too. So just trying to use that to my advantage, like getting the respect of not just like our guys, but like the defenders to close out on me, and then using my athleticism to get downhill, get to the rim, whatever, kick it and then cut off of that, kick it, set a ball screen, slip, whatever it is. Being more athletic, being more involved. I feel like in the past, it's been a lot of, swing the ball, stand still, watch JT ISO, watch JB ISO, set a ball screen ISO. And I think that what Joe wants is it to be more of a, 5 in, 5 out type of rotation where it's like we're all going super hard 4 or 5 minutes, boom, switch out, come in, new 5, whatever, and then fight for 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, everything just depends on how hard you're playing and are you willing to execute. So whether it's, 1 sub, 2 sub, it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you just got to play hard and execute what we're trying to do on any given night. And then, whatever the game calls for that particular night, whatever makes the most sense, we'll do that.
So you talk about pulling from the sports in the past, that type of hockey stuff had. Is that something you looked at with hockey, or is it just the correlation?
I'm not gonna lie to you, Jordan just said that to mess with you guys. We're not doing that. So, I know you guys need the headline, but that's not happening. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he either didn't want it out there or Walsh misunderstood. I don't even know what to make of that. It was weird.
My guess would be that Joe indicated that they could sub quickly, play a lot of guys, have short stints for guys, play 4 or 5 minutes at a time, play really hard, and then come out. The one thing that really stood out to me about the finals, and I've talked about this on my podcast, but just how limited minutes the key guys played for the Thunder and the Pacers. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played 38 minutes per game in the finals. Nobody else on their team played more than 34. That was Jalen Williams. Everybody else was like, I believe, under 30. The Pacers, nobody even played 34 full minutes per game for them. They played a ton of guys. They had guys in. They took guys out. TJ
I was trying to
McConnell
think
came
of
in,
this
totally
quote,
changed
Jay.
the energy. Normally in the finals, you see like guys, the best players are playing 43, 44 minutes a night. But the Thunder and Pacers, two teams that were able to just play harder than everybody and really like just beat teams with waves of energy, they kept their minutes down like to an extreme degree that we've probably never seen before in the finals. Maybe we have a long time ago. I don't remember that. But I think that's really interesting. And I think that could be a trend that catches on and something that the Celtics, especially without having as many, the type of top end talent that they used to have, could kind of lean on playing guys shorter spurts and having a ton of energy everywhere and trying to make that part of their identity.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I felt like somewhere along the line last postseason or somewhere last year, maybe it was the Magic, it might have been the Pacers. I know the Celtics didn't play them in the playoffs, but someone on one of these teams was talking about like go hard for a couple minutes, then you sub out, let someone else go hard. Like it must have been Orlando because they had a pretty deep rotation. The Celtics played them. It could have been Oklahoma City or Indiana, as you mentioned, because they played like that to some degree. But someone was talking about that hockey sub style last season, and I remember that pretty vividly, but I can't remember exactly who it was. So that was definitely something that was happening last year. The full court press, which I know the Celtics were trying out here and there, didn't utilize as well as some of these teams. Indiana ended up doing that great. There was just a lot of stuff going on, and Joe, despite pushing back on this, has said he's studying league trends, has tried to stay ahead on certain things other teams are doing well, and implementing them in Boston in his own way. So I actually do think we're going to see some of this. You said it earlier, like there's not a lot of separation in their rotation. They want to play super hard, which is going to stress guys a little bit, and they have a bunch of interchangeable wings and energy guys here. I even go all the way down to Hugo Gonzalez, who, was playing in a professional league last year, not playing a ton in it, and probably is a little bit of a long shot to be a rotation guy here. But if you're going to go deeper in your rotation and just throw guys out there for energy, he's a pretty big body and, apt cutter and solid defender who makes some sense if they're going to play a larger rotation this season. So I'm even interested in, go back to that little scrimmage video, Jay. Saw him out there in some of those lineups. So
knocked down a 3, I believe.
Yeah. So I think you could even see them go that deep into their rotation this year. There's just a lot of different guys who bring a lot of different things to the table here. And as you mentioned, not a lot of separation between them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see Joe figure it out. And I think it's a challenge that he relishes. He walked in his first year, like they were coming off a trip to the finals. I don't think he felt fully that he could change things because everybody respected the way Ime put together the team. And, when Joe finally felt comfortable to do things his way, it was like, there wasn't really any other way to do it. It was the roster was good enough. The hierarchy was established enough that you didn't have to make many changes. And this year, I think he can get a little creative. He can get a little funky. And I think that's something that he's going to have fun with.
He's Jay Kang. I'm about to go watch a baseball game. I'm sure you are too, Jay. I'm excited for this thing tonight. We got post-game coverage here on CLNS Media, so go
Yankees
check.
are a loser franchise.
I need this one tonight, man. I need them to go through. And are you going to Toronto next week?
I will not be at either of the road preseason games.
Okay, I'm
What kind of
dreaming of
maniac
this.
has a preseason game in Memphis?
The schedule is awful this preseason. Even
Crazy.
early regular season is a lot of road games. But regardless of what happens tonight, we will have coverage of it. Go subscribe over on Red Sox Clubhouse. We will be live tonight, me, Jimmy, and John. So whatever happens, we'll react to it in this game 3. It's going to decide Yankees and Red Sox seasons. Go check out Jay's work over at The Athletic. Subscribe over there for a lot of great coverage of the Celtics and the entire NBA. Love all the NBA stuff they have over there. And anything is potable. You guys still rolling?
Still potable now. We
Still
have changed
potable.
names. Still potable, baby.
Yep. So go check them out. They're on the Patreon, right? Go subscribe over there on the Patreon. And great to have you here, Jay. Thanks for hopping on tonight. I'll see you at practice tomorrow. And for everybody else, we'll see you later tonight with some Sox reaction. And again, show some love to our sponsors here, Prize Picks, code CLNS, as well as Game Time, code CLNS. Talk to you in a couple hours here. Enjoy the game.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
slide out over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke an hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke